Trump's import tariffs could spark global trade war. Well, yeah.
US President Donald Trump has confirmed his administration will enforce 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada and others on China as well, stoking concerns of a trade war and sending local financial markets into a spin. China and Canada have announced reciprocal tariffs on US goods. Let's bring in the ABC's chief business correspondent, Ian Verinder, who's here in the studio. Hi, Ian. A very busy day in terms of these tariffs. Perhaps best start with explaining to us who's placed tariffs on whom and what are they?
Well, Donald Trump about a month ago threatened both Canada and Mexico with 25% tariffs and also tariffs on China as well. Now, he gave a brief reprieve to both Canada and Mexico with the idea that they would come to some kind of agreement, they would accommodate America's wishes in terms of not just trade, but the fentanyl trade that was coming out of China. Now, there does seem to be quite a bit of progress made on that fentanyl front, but nevertheless, Mr. Trump has imposed the trade sanctions as promised, which they were due to come into effect tonight, actually. So he's announced them early. With China, he put tariffs in place back in his first term. They were left in place by the Biden administration. He imposed a 10% hike a month ago, and now another 10% will come into force tonight.
How does it work? I'm talking about consumers now and purchasers. Who suffers?
Well, your own constituents suffer, your own country suffers, because you're importing something and you're putting up the price of it. So your consumers are the ones who end up paying the price. The way it actually technically works is, for instance, in America, an American shoe distributor buys shoes from China. As soon as they land on the dock, he signs a piece of paper and pays that tariff. So the importer pays the tariff, and what's he going to do? He's going to go and sell them to his customers at a higher price.
Why does Trump like tariffs so much then?
He doesn't seem to get.
Well, no. He doesn't seem to get it, man.
That is the case. He seems to think that, and I've heard him say this many, many times, that China will be paying. Yeah. In fact, everybody ends up paying because your own consumers pay more. There's probably going to be less output in China because...
Where's this guy from? Is that CBS? Yeah.
Because the landed price is going to be higher. So the Chinese market will suffer as well. So
what this is going to do is worst case scenario. I don't know if it's worst case scenario, but I think Trump was trying to do is he wants everything made in America. So if China or Mexico or other countries are not willing to pay for that tariff, keep in mind, though, that the United States is their #1 consumer, right? Just like how Taiwan did. Instead of getting slapped with the 25% tariff on that micro technology, they're bringing the manufacturer here in the United States, saving them dollars and improving the economy of the United States. I mean, that's basically it. I'm no economist, but it sounds good to me.
There'll be less jobs in China and so forth. So it'll definitely hit the Chinese economy.
Well, yeah.
And next...
what did he say, Lindsay?
And next, he's threatened
jobs in China and so forth. So it'll definitely hit the Chinese economy. There's going to be less output in China because the landed price is going to be higher. So the Chinese market will suffer as well. So there'll be less jobs in China and so forth. So it'll definitely hit the Chinese economy.
And next, he's...
You hit it in the head, right? Look at the Chinese economy right now. It boomed for the last 20 years because of there was no tariff coming into the United States. Even their cargoes actually so cheap, so they're able to ship, pennies to a dollar. They're able to ship all that thing. That's why Temu, Amazon, and any of those big companies are able to ship it for cheap.
Threatened Europe, and that potentially might include Australia.
Well, yes, he's threatened Australia with tariffs as well, and the Treasurer Jim Chalmers was in Washington just last week trying to argue the case for Australia, an exemption for Australia, based on the fact that America runs a trade surplus with Australia. So, you know, they basically have a much better trade position with us. So the argument that there's you know, we're ripping them off, it doesn't hold water.
Yes, you are.
So I'm not sure that argument will win the day, though, because there's been quite a few people within the Republican administration arguing that Australia shouldn't be excluded. We also export some steel and some aluminium into America. Some of that is subsidised here by the government in terms of energy subsidies and so forth.
Yeah.
Rio Tinto is one of the world's biggest aluminium producers, and it exports quite a bit into America from Canada and Australia.
Yeah.
Would you say we are already in a trade war, or is that just a bit down the line?
Yes,
no, I think that's undoubtedly the case now. So these new tariffs, particularly on you know, your closest allies like Canada. You know, Canada's stood side by side with America forever in every confrontation. So has Australia, for that matter. And you know, Europe and America have had such close ties now, diplomatic and defence ties for 80 years. So to be making those kind of threats, that's definitely a trade war. Interestingly, Mr. Trump seems to be in the position where he's wanting to reduce trade sanctions on Russia, where he's at the same time simultaneously putting trade barriers in place against his allies.
You know very well that markets don't like uncertainty. No. How have they reacted?
Trump is just trying to level the playing field when it comes to trade for the last decades and all that. And I read a report about, like, you know, U.S. has always been the losers on that trade. So Trump is just looking into that and say, wait a minute, you know, it's time for us to, you know, at least level it, or, you know, get back to all those years that you've been taking advantage of the United States.
Well, I mean, the uncertainty is what the impact of this is going to be on the global economy. So on the one hand, it could be highly inflationary because it will push prices up for consumers, and it also may you know, really hit the
He's making it sound like
growth. So we could have...
He's making it sound like the prices and price gouging and inflation is a new thing. No, it's not.
A slowing global economy and another spike in inflation, which is the worst of both worlds for a central bank, because when you want to try and hit inflation, you want to bring it back under control, you raise interest rates. But raising interest rates slows the economy. So generally speaking, you would have, if you got you know, high inflation, you would have a booming economy. And so when you know, put higher interest rates in place, it brings economic growth and inflation down. If they're moving in opposite directions, it's not a great thing.
You've got an excellent piece on the ABC News website, Ian, which I read, and you talk about the potential possibility of America going into a recession as well, but that actually the Trump administration might not mind that in the short term.
Well, there is a bit of a theory out there that they wouldn't mind you know, a slowdown at least in economic growth to bring interest rates back into play. So if you get interest rates coming down because growth is slowing, that would reduce the American government's interest bill on its huge debts. As I said, though, the problem with that is, though, if you do this by pushing up inflation, it's going to make it awfully difficult for the US Federal Reserve to bring that under control.
Ian, always good to have your perspective. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lorna.
Yeah, so all those economists are always driven by their, you know, bias. China retaliates after Trump tariffs come into effect. Okay.
That they will look to impose tariffs on some U.S. goods as well. What else do we know about the China response to the U.S. tariffs?
Yes, again, going exactly by the playbook like clockwork. At 1 p.m., seconds after that, China released its slew of countermeasures, pretty extensive this time round compared to the previous round in February. They're targeting up to 15% tariffs on a list of U.S. goods. I'm just going to go through them very quickly. 10% on pork, beef, soybean, sorghum, fruits, vegetables, and dairy products. The one on soybean, of course, had been highly anticipated. And 15% tariffs on wheat, cotton, chicken, and corn. So all of these are agricultural
other
commodities.
countries that should be able to support or send us or supply with those until we can make our own in the United States.
They are largely still less than proportional to the scale of the U.S. tariffs, because we're talking about 10 to 15% tariffs from China versus 20% from Trump if you count in the first 10% plus the second round of 10%. And you look at the scale of it, the range of the goods covered. U.S. tariffs cover all Chinese goods, but the Chinese tariffs are targeting specific sectors, mainly the agricultural sector. So it's a clear message here. While it's impactful, but China is signaling that they are open to negotiations. That was as much what the NPC spokesperson said at the earlier, that they're hoping that they can resolve these trade issues through consultations. Now, aside from tariffs, China also targeted other non-tariff measures, including adding 10 firms to a U.S. unreliable entity list, as well as prohibiting the sale of dual-use items to 15 U.S. entities. And of course, one of their favorite methods, which is to file a complaint to the WTO as well. But again, very clear signal that from the NPC spokesperson that they believe that bilateral trade is win-win for both sides, and they want to resolve this through negotiations.
That's kind of scares me when he says win-win for both sides.
Yeah, thanks for bringing the additional analysis to us, because we were trying to wrap our heads around the reaction in Asian markets today and the fact that a lot of these Asian indices have actually bounced back, a case of buy the rumor, sell the fact, and perhaps because the response was not as powerful as some people thought it was going to be. Just quickly, Min Min, how does this set us up for the NPC in the coming days?
Well, the NPC, I mean, of course, tomorrow is the government work report by Li Qiang that we are paying attention to, where he will outline the key economic targets for the year. We talked about that yesterday, the growth target, inflation target, and the stimulus measures. But again, as I mentioned, tariffs, the countermeasures has already been announced. What's next now is the negotiations, the back channel communications, and that high-level talk that...
Key priorities to watch for NPC. Defense budget, tech sector, trade session, property market, consumption.
It hasn't really happened. We're waiting to see how that would change the calculus when it comes to trade. But China is really focused on building the resilience of its domestic economy to boost domestic consumption to counter the risk of tariffs.
Yeah. There's another one. Canada responds to impending Trump tariff with its own.
We begin with some breaking news out of Washington here tonight. President Trump pausing U.S. military aid to Ukraine. Yeah. The directive comes just days after a contentious Oval Office meeting between the president and Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky. A White House official says this pause on aid is meant to pressure Zelensky into agreeing on a deal to end the three-year war with Russia. Earlier today, President Trump slammed Zelensky for suggesting the end of the war is still very far away. And also breaking tonight, Canada striking back with tariffs on U.S. goods. Roughly an hour from now, President Trump's 25% tax will begin on imports from Mexico and Canada. And late tonight, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau said that's the same time Canada will begin 25% taxes on U.S. exports. So what could it mean for you? Dick Brennan is breaking it all down.
You don't know what they're going to charge.
Angelo Pappas of Chelsea Forest says he doesn't know how much higher prices may go due to tariffs, but he knows who's going to pay for it.
Whatever they charge us, they have to pass to the customers. So what else do you do? Otherwise, we'll close the store.
And it's not just flowers. Tariffs could hit across the economy.
You could
Grow your own
actually see
flowers
the
here.
cost to heat your home go up pretty quickly. You could see the cost that you're paying for gas at the pump go up pretty quickly because those price increases, that actually doesn't take that long to flow through. So I'm talking the next few weeks.
President Trump is imposing 25% tariffs on Mexico and Canada and an additional 10% on China, saying they haven't done enough to stop drugs coming across the border.
Yeah.
The tariffs, they're all
Good.
set. They go into effect tomorrow.
One study found the price of a large SUV with parts from Mexico could jump $9,000. Another estimates the new tariffs could cost the average U.S. family more than $1,200 a year. But Trump says tariffs will push people to buy American, and he says there's a simple solution for countries that want to avoid tariffs.
What they have to do is build their car plants, frankly, and other things in the United States, in which case they have no tariffs.
To make his point today, Trump hosted the CEO
There we
of
go.
Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing, who pledged
Smart
to invest
guy.
$100 billion in new plants in the U.S., and he said Honda has ditched its plan to open a new plant in Mexico, opting instead for Indiana to avoid tariffs. But states like New York are worried, and tomorrow morning, Governor Hochul will hold a roundtable with farmers and agricultural leaders impacted by tariffs.
I'd be terrified to know that the damage that could happen is people losing their jobs in New York and all across America. We can't let that happen.
Canada, Mexico, and China make up 40% of all U.S.
Okay, she's making it sound like there's no jobs lost in New York for the last, 4 years. Matter of fact, was that Amazon that it was supposed to build some plant in New York, and AOC, she had something to do with it. That's why they didn't build it in New York, in the Bronx area.
U.S. imports, and China has already imposed retaliatory tariffs. Hey,
So
Chelsea,
what?
Dick Brennan, CBS News, New York.
That's not new.
The tariffs announcement rattled the stock market. The Dow dropped 649 points. The S&P fell 104, and the
Nothing new.
NASDAQ closed nearly 500 points lower. There is no word on whether
Nothing
President Trump will
new
talk about the
under
tariffs
the
when he addresses
sun.
a joint session of Congress.
Yeah, that's going to be a joint Congress later on tonight. Actually, it's 7 Central Standard. That'll be tonight. So this is the premier of Ontario to shut off power.
In Michigan and in Minnesota. If he wants to destroy dollars of contracts that we have with the U.S., we are the largest purchaser of alcohol in the world. We buy over 3,600 products from 35 states.
Yeah.
I talked to the governor of Kentucky and Mitch McConnell. Don't touch our bourbon. I'm going after absolutely everything. And I don't want to. We keep the lights on to 1.5 million homes in manufacturing in New York, in Michigan, and in Minnesota. If he wants to destroy our economy and our families, I will shut down the electricity going down to the U.S. And I'm telling you, we will do it. It's unfortunate. I would rather ship you more electricity, ship you more critical.
So you're going to hold that ransom. That's not a good idea, bro. Trying to threaten President Trump? Is that what you're trying to do?
Minerals. I want to ship you more energy, more potash to keep your farmers going, and uranium that you use for your nuclear power. It comes through from Saskatchewan over to Ontario.
Yeah, how much?
It's going to be a massive, massive problem.
No.
I'm telling you, we love the Canadians love Americans. I love the U.S.
Yeah,
Everyone
because
does.
you've been sucking on us for a very long time. Man, this guy's
one
bluffing.
American friend. When I lived there for 20 years, I've talked to all of them. Hardcore Republicans are saying this is the biggest mistake President Trump has done.
Who was that? Zelensky? Collins? Is that the one telling you that?
Against it. I've yet to find one that supports him.
Yeah. See some of those comments. There's no downside here. We get annex winning. We don't. Strong trade was fine. In the end, they're not coming after me. They're coming after you. I'm just standing in the way. Stand with Trump in America. First Parliament doing mammoth nation today. If Ontario shuts off the power, nobody freezes. The cost of electricity simply goes up. This is a national security issue. Yeah. Trump will not let that happen. U.S. boots will be on the ground to Anna's Canada. Don't do this. I don't think so, though. Who cares? We don't even care about getting Anna's. Yeah. All right. Well, that's it. That is your tariff war for today. We'll do it again tomorrow and see.